Welcome to Parrot TV Literary Corner. I am Dustin Pickering, your anchor and host for the day. Happy Easter, everyone. Please subscribe to the channel. Today, we have Duane Vorhees. Duane Vorhees retired to Thailand after teaching for the University of Maryland and Korea and Japan for a quarter century. Before that, he bummed around, got a doctorate from Bowling Green State University, worked a variety of jobs, and was on the faculties of Seoul National University and Korea University. Since he left full-time teaching, Hog Press of Amos, Iowa, has published 3 collections of his poetry, and those are The Many Loves of Duane Vorhees, Gift, God Runs Through All These Rooms, and Heaven. Please welcome Duane Vorhees to the program. How are you doing today, Duane?
Well, I am doing very, very well. Thank you.
That's excellent. I'm glad to hear it. So your Easter's going pretty good. I'm hoping. So have you been doing any literary activity for the day? Sometimes the holidays spur people on writing. So I just wondered, not today.
Just waiting for this show. My in the spotlight.
So tell us a little bit more about yourself and your books. My observation of what I've read of your literature is you're really fond of puns and wordplay, like really intricate wordplay. So how would you come about that technique, or is it conscious, or is it just like it flows naturally from your pen, or how does that work?
Well, it must be a combination of both. It starts from within somewhere. I've always been a bad punster, and I actually haven't lost any friends over that, but many of them have been shamefaced to admit that they know me. So consciously, I've tried to raise that to a higher level. So the ordinary, just little stupid puns, I've tried to have some merit behind it, often a double or triple entendre.
And notice that they have there's different levels as you speak of. So I mean, do you consciously put that in there, or is that just flow out? Does that something that's actually and deliberate, or does it come immediate to you, or is it later on you look at it and you say, well, hey, that means multiple things. Let's play with that.
Usually again, it's a combination of both, but usually I try to, I enjoy ambiguity in poetry without seeming to be ambiguous. I think people can read my poetry in a very straightforward way and not even imagine that there might be some other way of looking at it. I don't think I am vague in my poetry, but I'm equally aware that someone else can take it in a completely different direction, very legitimately.
Right. I think that's a good thing about poetry is it's multi-directional, and as you said, it can be both ambiguous and straightforward. And I think in poetry, one of the most beautiful things is when those moments occur when you don't have to necessarily be aware of the multiple meanings of something in order to enjoy and appreciate the beauty of the language. So who are some of your
think that's happened a lot in English classes that I've taught, where obviously there are a group of students and somebody, not my poetry, but someone will have a perfectly good poem from Donne or from Robert Frost or something, and be absolutely sure what that poem means, and somebody else in the class would say, well, I didn't get that. And then we have a real dialogue.
Right, that's exactly, and that's the beauty of it. It's very subjective as long as you can defend your essential point, and say in the work, this is what's in the work, that I see and why I see it that way. Poetry is a very subjective experience, and that's the beauty of it. So what are some of your literary icons that you look up to and your as far as influencing your writing and just in general that you enjoy?
I actually don't read very much poetry. I haven't. Most poetry that I read frankly doesn't move me. A lot of it is written by people who aren't writing poetry at all. They're essentially just writing prose. They don't have imagery. They don't have direction. They don't have surprise. They don't have wordplay. And a little of that can be very good. I like Charles Bukowski. He does all of those things, but he does it brilliantly, I think. I used to really dislike Leonard Cohen, but after many experiences with him, I suppose he is my main influence. I try very hard not to write like him, however. It's easy to copy somebody else, but in the back of my mind, there's often a sense of, well, what would he do, or how can I avoid doing what I know he would do in this situation? But a lot of the themes are similar. I like the pictorial quality of E.E. Cummings. I like Dylan Thomas at his most extravagant.
Right.
So there are a lot of, despite what I said earlier, there are a lot of poems that I actually do read. I usually don't like them when I first come across them, though.
Right. Can have to absorb it a little bit, I think.
Right.
You have to let it in.
You have to learn how they became a poet. You have to learn how that poem works before it can really start churning.
Right. Are you familiar with Pablo Neruda?
Not very much. I know the name, of course. Haven't read much of Neruda.
Yeah, he might be somebody you'd be interested in checking out, because he has a very earthy, sensual kind of poetry that's I think would be aligned with a little bit with some of yours. He doesn't use the wordplay as much. He uses more like painting. His words are like painting and music combined. Very beautiful.
And, of course, the translation from the Spanish may drastically affect that.
Right. So when you're teaching poetry, how do you go about instructing your students? I mean, do you introduce them to the poem and let them talk about it, or do you have a series of techniques that you teach?
I don't have a series of techniques. I have them read it mostly before they come to class, and let them try to form their own opinions. I taught, when I was with University of Maryland, I taught military personnel. The University of Maryland has overseas college classes for people. Mostly I taught people in the Army, but Navy, Marines, embassy staff people, some civilians not connected with the government at all. Early on, some Koreans. And most of these students were in the military because they were not good students in high school for all kinds of reasons. Some of them just not smart, some of them poor, some of them didn't have any role models. But one of the reasons that they joined the military was to get an education. And so a lot of them were far more dedicated than the average college freshman, who probably always knew he was going to go to college and was a naturally at least fair to good student. And so many of them they had to take English. They didn't have any choice. They didn't have to take literature classes, but they did because that was what was offered to them. And most of them, I think, like most Americans, have a dreadful idea of what poetry is and what it can be. I think mostly they had really bad English teachers in their school days. And so there was always this initial curve of them just realizing that a poem is not really some alien creature. It is like any other form of writing. It uses essentially the same grammatical structures and the same techniques that the novel that they like has. It's just condensed. And once they get over that hurdle of saying, well, I can read this, I can understand that, they were easy to teach from that point on. But they did the work. They did the teaching. I didn't tell them what the poem was supposed to mean.
Right.
I would encourage them. I'd say, well, what do you mean by that? Ask all these Socratic kinds of questions. But it's not up to me to tell them what something that they read means.
Oh, of course. And do you ever have a sort of aha moment with your students, like where you're teaching and they're learning and they teach you something back in return, like something you might not have observed before?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Once a smart Korean girl in my class gave me a takeaway on Stephen Crane's "A Man Said to the Universe, Sir, I Exist," and she came up with exactly the opposite interpretation that I had always had, and it was perfectly sound and just really opened up that poem to me.
Oh, wow. Interesting. So you're in Korea right now. So how did
So
you
I'm in
or in
Thailand
Thailand?
right now.
You're in Thailand right now. How did
Right.
you wind up on the complete opposite side of the globe from the United States? Since you you were taught in Maryland, and you ended up all the way to the other side of the globe. How did that come about?
Well, I was in Charleston, South Carolina, working at a shipyard, and they ran out of government contracts, so I was laid off. But an old high school friend of mine was teaching elementary school for the Department of Defense in Busan. And so my idea was that I would just go to Korea like the last month or so of his school year and then come back with him. I had a place to stay. Basically, all I had to do was have an airplane ticket. And he told me that I should buy a nice camera and probably pay for my trip. So I did that. I borrowed some money and took off for Korea, sold the camera, didn't really make much money, but I lost it all anyway. Somebody stole it. So I didn't have the money to pay back my friend that I borrowed to buy the camera. So I started teaching what they call a hagwon. It's just an English language institute, basically teaching people how to speak. It's not a very advanced kind of program. And so I thought I'd stay another month and another month and another month. And I ended up staying there a lot of months.
Wow. That's quite a story there. You never know where life is going to take you. You just kind of let it, as they say, let it flow in, you just do what you're doing and then never know where the next step will be. You had your camera stolen,
My half-baked plan was that when I went back to the US, I had bought a used van, and I was just going to be a traveling minstrel and try to just read poems, and somebody put me up for the night and feed me, and then I'd go on to the next town. And I mean, that never would have worked out. But by the time I got back, to Charleston, the van was just rust, and it was.
Wow. So how are the poetry scene out there in Thailand? Is there a difference? Do you see that? Do you ever attend readings, or do you just teach there?
Well, eventually, a real good friend of mine named Dan Dustin, who was just a natural organizer of things like these, started open mics all over Seoul. I was basically a charter member of his network of open mics and rarely missed an opportunity to show off in front of an audience. At one point, one of the drunken audience members, I'm not sure if he said that I was the grandfather of the open mics or the godfather of the open mics, but anyway, I was a regular on the scene. Sometimes I hosted, but I always read or performed. I did stand-up comedy. I was in a band called the Kimchi Cowboys. I cannot sing, but I recited instead of sang. We were kind of a legendary act there in the Seoul area because we were completely different than anybody else. So that's how I got my poetry kicks in Korea.
Excellent. Would you like to share a sample of your work with us?
Well, I could do that.
Yes, please do.
Is there a book that you would like me to get something from?
Not just whatever you think is appropriate.
All right. Well, so
Parrot TV. Let's go for
what?
it.
No, this is my most recent book, maybe my last one, and you can see it, I guess, Evan. And approximately half the book is just translations from the Korean, and the other part of it would be the most recent poems that I had written when this came out. So here is an angler's tale. Born by the river, I became quite familiar with the local fishing holes. With my treasured fishing pole, I caught my share of trophy bluegills, sunfish, and crappies. Though truth to tell, I must say, some of the best got away. My hook was always baited. Lazy and satiated, I was the last to expect that I'd be the one netted by some patient, hungry girl born by the river.
It's a bit of a fabalistic, I think I coined that phrase just now, fabalistic.
Yeah.
It has a kind of a fabalistic feel to it. Was there any inspiration behind that, or was there some message you were trying to convey in the poem?
Well, there certainly is a doubleness to the poem. Somebody could read this just straightforwardly as somebody who liked to fish, and completely miss the sexual innuendo in it. And I'm sure a lot of dirty-minded poets would only see the sexual innuendo and completely miss the fishing aspects. But no, there's no particular inspiration other than just wordplay. It's not biographical in any real sense.
Right. So would you like to maybe read another sample from another composition, or if you would like to choose something from that one still, that would be fine as well.
Okay, well, Why We Never Married. Searching for sunlight in the fog, being neither wheel nor cog, not being owned, used, or sold, was always the goal. Wishing for no position of opposition or support, abjuring any port, left me rudderless at sea. Thus, my version of being free in a time of testing, not acceptance.
That's interesting. Same question. What was inspiring that poem? What was your thought process like with that?
Well, this actually was related to, the early love of my life, and I was nowhere close to getting married. I thought I would never get married. That meant having responsibilities and a job and things that I took seriously, even though I didn't do anything about them. But I knew I'd have to if I got married, and so I never made the right moves, and lost that particular fish then.
Right. So you also curate Duane's poetry. Can you tell us a little bit about how you select the process, or do you still do that?
I don't still do that. I blame Google, but they might not be at fault. 3 or 4 times, I completely lost the ability to access the dashboard. And so eventually I just said, screw it. And so the the actual site is still up. Anybody can read the contents, but nobody can comment. I can't add anything to it. It is dead in the water. But it started off slowly. I was retired and sort of looking for something to do, and thought it might be a neat thing to have a site that somebody could go to every day, and they could sit out on their porch and drink a cup of coffee and smoke a cigarette and read some good poems. And and also have a method of actually putting my stuff out in public. I had never done that until very recently. So it started primarily with me, and then some friends from the Soul open mic network. They started sending me things, and then people that I never heard of started sending me things. And at its peak, a few hundred people a day were reading it. I had contributors from dozens and dozens of countries all over the world. And it was quite a going concern. I spent a lot of time on it. Almost always I had some kind of illustration to go with the poem. If I thought there was something that needed to be explicated, I would take the time to say, well, this is what this references, some historical event or some literary event that people wouldn't necessarily know. And so it was a very time consuming, but eventually, I got tired of it, but I wouldn't have quit if Google would have been cooperative at all.
Right. It was a very interesting blog, and I would go on there, and when I would have to publish my poetry, there was always you'd always have very copious notes on the poems, and it was surprising. Not always, but
a lot of them speak for themselves. But
right.
But they would have references that we are no longer in a culture, and of course these are from many cultures, where people would automatically know what is being talked about.
Right.
And so in essence, these were like footnotes that I would add, so somebody would have some idea of what is actually being mentioned here. I never tried to interpret it, but
right. It just
will you say you are fulfilled as will you say you are fulfilled as a writer? As a poet, are you fulfilled?
Am I fulfilled as a poet? I have been writing poetry since I was a freshman in college. The practice has always been fulfilling. The poems themselves are never fulfilled. They could always be better than they are. Sometimes I manage to tweak them a little bit and make them better, but they are. I am not a golfer, but I guess it is the same attitude the golfers have. You play against yourself when you are golfing. It is you against the game, and sometimes, most of the time, the game wins. And so that's, I think, what poetry is. It's an attempt to use words in colorful and creative and meaningful ways that will capture somebody else's attention. Have I lost you, by the way?
I'm still here.
Okay, because
go ahead. We're listening to you. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
There wasn't any movement, and I just wondered. So, anyway, I think some poems I am satisfied with. The majority of them, I wish they were better.
Right. Yeah, that happens to me too. It's a very universal experience.
I think so, except for hacks.
Yeah. We have about 4 minutes left if you'd like to convey your final message as to other poets, teachers, creative minds out there. What would you like to say to them worldwide?
As a human, as a reader, as a writer, be brave.
Excellent.
Okay? That is all you need to do.
Face yourself and your inner demons and your inner struggles, and
let them rage. Maybe they will leave.
Paper.
Maybe they will bring their friends inside with them. But that's
a good.
But so what?
If you have before we close the show, if you have any opportunity of changing anything in the area of academics regarding creative teaching of creative writing or poetry, what would you have loved to change?
Education should be a self-fulfilling endeavor. It should not be just to make money. It should not be just to occupy some social position. This is for students and teachers and administrators alike. Be bold, be free, let the human spirit prevail.
That's excellent.
Do you feel the teaching methodology used nowadays for teaching English language, literature or poetry in particular, is ideal for young learners?
No, it's not only in the United States, although the situation is different. When I taught in Korean universities, for them, it is just memorization. So I could give a pop quiz and have like 5 or 6 questions. When was Edmund Spencer born? Everybody in the class would know that. When did he die? Everybody in the class would know that. And you recite part of his most famous work. Everybody could do that. So far, I've got a 0 on my own test. I could look these things up, but I don't know what they are. And then the zinger would be the last question. Why is Edmund Spencer important? And I would just get a blank look. That would be the one that I could pass. So, there's too much concentration on having the right answer rather than, I suppose, the righteous answer.
That's excellent. Fun on words there, right and righteous, for convey that message. So we're closing in on just a minute or two left. So I'm going to go ahead and close out. This has been the New York Parrot Literary Corner. Happy Easter, everybody. This has been wonderful discussion with Duane Vorhees about education, poetry, and the love of the arts. And if you're watching right now, please subscribe to the channel. And Duane, thank you so much for coming out here on Easter and talking with us this time of the day. I know it's late for you, it's early for us. So thank you very much. And hopefully I wish you well. And if you want to say anything else, appreciate the viewers.
Thank
you very much. You're very welcome. So this has been the New York Parrot Literary Corner on Easter Sunday. Tell your friends and invite other people to come watch and like our videos. And please, if you would like to be on the show, contact us at the New York Parrot Literary Corner. We'd love to have you. We're very open. This platform is open to anyone and everyone with creative mind who would like to speak and who would like to discuss their work. Thank you very much for joining us today. Subscribe to the channel. 1 million subscribers. We're looking for 1 million subscribers. We challenge you to support us and support other creative minds. We know this is not happening much in the world today, that the creative minds are supporting each other. It's not happening as much as it should. Please support us. We'll support you. Thank you very much. Have a happy Easter.